Thank you all for joining for our Job Search Insights panel with our wonderful alumni here. Very, very excited to be chatting with you all about this. My name is Kinsley. I am our admissions and alumni, or senior admissions and alumni community specialist. So really, really excited to be able to share some of these incredible alumni stories with you all. This is really a chance for you all to get a better understanding of Codesmith's immersive experience as a whole, as well as the resources that we offer, and just how you can benefit from this as a graduate and as you move into the alumni space following the immersive. Our amazing career support engineer, Alex, is here to help lead this panel. He will be asking questions to our alumni and our alumni. We have Etana here, as well as Nick, Zahara, and Rami. They all come from different campuses and cohorts and backgrounds and are really excited to share with you their own experiences, whether that is a Codesmith experience, a favorite resource, or just talking a bit more of what they're working on now. They are all recent graduates. They've all recently been hired as well. So also a huge round of applause for them for going through their job search, coming out on the other side, and just all they will go on to accomplish. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to have our panelists go through, answer each question that we have prepared, and we'll hold for your own questions at the end. So saving the last 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes of this panel for anything you have. Again, if you do have something, please submit it using that question form. But without further ado, I'm going to pass off to Alex here to get us started.
Hey, everybody. I really appreciate you all joining today. So my name's Alex. I graduated LA 35, so back in June of 2020. Most recently, I've been doing platform engineering work at Socialive. So we do video streaming for like banks and governments and that type of deal. But this is all about our panelists who have been recently hired. They're all recent grads. So we'll get into some of the intros. So all of you could just let us know your name, your cohort, what you do before Codesmith, and then what you're up to now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Etana. I graduated from Petrie Great, and that is Petrie cohort number 8. Prior to Codesmith, I was in biology research, working in a lab. And right now I'm biding my time because I actually start my new position on Monday.
Perfect. Congratulations. And we'll go into Nick.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick. I was part of C315, so I just graduated this past June. And so before Codesmith, I was working in chemical manufacturing, doing customer care. And I'm currently now a senior applications engineer at Icetec.
Perfect. And Zahara?
Hi, yeah, my cohort was ECRE 38, so East Coast. And I graduated in April. Right before Codesmith, I was a lead system engineer at L3 Harris. And right now I'm a senior Fullstack engineer at Cohere AI.
Perfect. And then last but certainly not least, Rami.
Hey y'all, I'm Rami. I graduated ECRE 35. So we graduated October 2022. I used to be a high school science teacher, neuroscience and biology. And now I am a software engineer for PGA Tour.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, it's great to hear all of your experiences. Just to get us kicked off, can you tell us a bit why you chose Codesmith, your specific campus, and why Codesmith stood out to you specifically? So we'll go in the same order.
Yeah, so I actually had the luck of knowing one of the previous instructors, someone who had went to Codesmith, then taught at Codesmith, and then worked on developing the part-time program. And he talked a lot about it and how he was able to go from being a high school dropout to being a software engineer and the whole story. So it was pretty clear that this was a general thing that I wanted to do. And then Codesmith specifically, he had such an amazing experience building community at Codesmith, and that is really what made it stand out to me. I'm very community oriented. I like people. I want to have those connections, and Codesmith is the only place that really allows for and creates and fosters those sorts of connections. So I did the part-time, And that is because, so initially I was on the fence of doing part-time or full-time. I talked to a few people, both who had done Codesmith and one of the instructors. And while both ended up being really good for everything, I also had a full-time job. So it was that plus the community was a little bit stronger building because in Petrie, we are with each other for 9 months instead of 3. And why the Codesmith stood out to me, it was community, all about that for me.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah, so I chose Codesmith because I first heard about it from a friend whose friend did it, and that kind of just piqued my interest overall. So I had done some exploration, some research into Codesmith, but overall, I, like Etana, chose Codesmith because of the community. Everything throughout the whole process just felt so human, from my interviews, technicals, and even like providing mentoring before my technical interviews. And so once I'd gotten in, I was going between Eastern remote and then Central remote, but overall I picked Central remote because one, I like to sleep in, so I got an extra hour to and like sleep and then start at 10 a.m. But yeah, I just really like that flexibility for myself.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And Zahara?
Yeah, so I chose Codesmith because my spouse actually attended in 2021. And she came from a non-technical background. I was looking to transition from like a technical background, but into web development. I have more of a software background in embedded, so I was trying to quickly transition those skill sets. Yeah, she had great results. The career planning, the career like resources were great. And just like the community, like Etana had said, like it's not something that you find very often. And having worked with engineers in projects in the real world, like working together is realistic, and that workflow will serve you in the real workflow. So that was definitely your main reason.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And then Rami?
All I'm going to say is Reddit. Went on 11 o'clock at night and said, hey, what's the best immersive that I can apply to? Woke up in the morning and saw a disastrous amount of comments and all these like people like bashing each other. I hate App Academy. It's the worst. But the one thing that I saw that had the most likes was Codesmith. So I was like, Codesmith? Okay, let me check that out. Thank you, Reddit, kind of. So I actually researched Codesmith, and as someone who's a teacher, an educator at one of the most heavily armed high schools in New York City, we were a founding member of this school, and we were able to change it because of empathetic teaching practices and pedagogy, community, trust. And when I kind of reached out to other people about Codesmith, they said, hey, that's all Codesmith, literally. I am a living testament as someone in the program that, I failed a lot of assessments, yet when I graduated 1 month after, I got a job. And it goes back to that empathy, community, and trust. And I promise you, most people that have graduated from Codesmith will literally say that is the foundation of Codesmith, and you will not find that anywhere else. There are some like other new boot camps trying to pretend like they're Codesmith and whatnot, but you need someone that has a legacy behind them, and that's the reason why I chose Codesmith.
Perfect. Yeah, we can definitely see that sense of community, and that really resonates with me as well. Perfect. So on the same vein, as you go through the program, we know that people often encounter blocks or can experience imposter syndrome. Was there a specific person or resource that you relied on when you were feeling this way?
There were lots of times that the material was hard, or the project was hard, or working with someone else was hard. And whatever it was that was, the challenge, I knew that I could, first of all, trust my cohort. We all had gone through the same process to get in. We all were on the same page. Whatever our main skills were, those were different. But who we were as people, I knew I could trust and ask for help. And if there was, so like pretty much everyone, unfortunately, no, there was not a single person. The resource was my entire cohort. Not to mention also the instructors and the instructor aides and the fellows. So really, there was always someone that I felt like I could ask for help, whatever it was, whether it was mental, emotional, or technical.
Okay, perfect. That's really wonderful to hear. And Nick?
Yeah, I'm just gonna be an echo chamber for that because I once again really relied heavily on my cohort mates and the fellows. Throughout Codesmith, there's these things called APCs, and with those APCs, they were basically academic progress checks where if you weren't doing so hot on some material, you would work with a fellow, and that's what actually really helped guide me through Codesmith. Were the few APCs that were like, here's how we're going to think about it, here's how we can talk about it. And it was a little bit of handholding that really carried me a long way forward in grasping code on my own in the future. And so whenever I had any kind of block or felt any kind of imposter syndrome, it was really just the overall community between my cohort mates and fellows to say, hey, can I get another set of eyes on this? Because right now I'm in this block, I'm frustrated, and I can't see things for myself. And that honestly solves so many of my problems because you're blind to your own code sometimes, and just having another person look at it for 5 minutes and say, you missed a period right here, is enough to just get you through.
Awesome. Great insight. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, so feeling imposter syndrome is definitely not foreign. Being an engineer for many years before this, you kind of just live in that imposter syndrome. And you're just constantly learning. So something just to get used to is just constantly learning and being okay with like saying, I don't know, and getting help from others. So like that is definitely something to adjust to. And for me, there was definitely a couple people that I leaned on, mainly in my OSP group, who I ended up, choosing for my OSP group because of that. And we really, jive together really well, communication style wise.
Perfect. And just for clarification, OSP is your open source product, which we'll get into explaining and answer more questions in a bit. Perfect. And Rami.
Yeah, definitely like what Zahara mentioned, that the imposter syndrome is very, very real. Well into your first job, your second job, your third job, it will always be there, especially because you're learning a new whole code base. But going back to it, community in Codesmith is real, y'all. When I said, you know what, like I'm not gonna live up to these, like, I come from an Egyptian background, so being a man, you have to hold up to these gender norms, and saying you need help is kind of like frowned upon. So I'm like, yo, F that. I'm going to break that. I'm going to reach out and say, hey, I'm kind of like, my eyes are getting a little watery. I'm really struggling. Anyone here want to help? And you just see a massive amount of people saying, hey, let's meet after class. Let's discuss everything. Let's see what we can do with each other. And when I failed my first assessment, I was heartbroken because I thought I would do really well. I didn't. So I had something called an APC. I think someone wrote in the chat, Kinsley wrote that, I keep forgetting, the academic progress check. And it was an hour of the most beautiful, detailed, like learning and knowledge I ever got within that 1 hour. So I took the second assessment. Kinsley, I hope you don't kill me for this. And I was like, you know what, maybe I can fail this to get another APC because I'm getting so much information, but it just shows you like how well Codesmith cares so much of how well you do. And you will not leave, you'll leave actually with a very strong foundation. Like this job is easier than a lot of things I've learned in Codesmith, which I'm very happy about. And it just shows you the volumes of education that they teach you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of you have said wonderful insight about the program, and I think it really does speak to that community aspect, which was true from my experience as well. Perfect. So in the immersive, you have a variety of topics, both technical, like core curriculum lectures, and non-technical, like salary negotiations, dealing with imposter syndrome. So really appreciate all of you sharing that. Now, as you near the end of Codesmith, you enter the job search. So there are a variety of Codesmith career and hiring support resources. You have graduate groups that meet regularly post-graduation, which is an amazing resource. Career support engineers like myself, and there's a ton of other wonderful engineers who work in industry to do resume reviews, help you all the way through mock interviews, and even help you understand a little bit of the dynamics as you get into your job. Regular workshops that you can attend to further your education as well. So in your job search, was there any particular resource that you found especially helpful?
Cover letters, 100%. What you actually write to make yourself stand out, sound credible, like you know what you're talking about. Be confident about who you are and what you're also asking for. That was the most amazing workshop, and I think we actually had a couple. Like, and I've also been at like other outside workshops. And being able to actually convey who you are, and at the same time, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you're just a person. If you are a person, then, and you can communicate that, that went such a long way. But the biggest thing about this one is this was led by our founder, Will Sentence. And it was, I remember looking at the time, because you were sharing his screen, and it was like 3 a.m. for him because he was in Europe at the time. And I'm like, so committed, so down to earth. It is a horrible time of mourning. And this is what everything is built on. And I felt so connected all the way to the founder. It was so wonderful to feel that in the midst of also knowing how to spread that out through my cover letters.
That's great to hear. And yeah, I really think it's awesome that Will is so involved. We'll go on to Nick.
Yeah, definitely. And so when I was going through my job search, I once again really agree with that sentiment of just that the hiring process and the amount of help that and resources that we were able to get between being able to write cover letters, which I struggled so much before doing because I didn't know what to do, resume help, and just being able to practice with a variety of people was honestly the biggest thing. I think going through the interview process, I have like so many nerves. My heart rate will go up. I'm like about to like sweat everything off. And it was still so true even through my job hunt, but without Codesmith, being able to do it like 20 times before my first ever interview really helped me get a good script and kind of this robotic nature to it where I wouldn't even have to think and I could give my spiel about who I am and what I am to different jobs. And so that kind of support was amazing, just being able to have that continual practice and guidance through it.
Perfect. Yeah, that practice really does pay off. So great to hear your experience, Zahara.
Yeah, just to echo, I think like the job search was a lot easier. I have definitely done job searches in the past, and having like the resources and the narrative building and the resume building and just refining that. Like, I personally probably would not have refined my resume down to the level that Codesmith suggested. It definitely helped, and I guess like one of the things I really leaned into was building that narrative, really committing it to internal memory, and then like working with the grad group post Codesmith. I like to say that the job hunt is like Codesmith 2.0. You're done with Codesmith, but you have to learn how to interview now. So like that is definitely something that having a team helps a lot with.
That's great to hear. And Rami, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, also to mention what Zahara just mentioned, the idea of the interview, the first one I ever had in 10 years, I was so arrogant walking in like, oh, I'm gonna kill this disaster. And I think it ties back to also what Nicholas, like just the idea of practicing, having that narrative all the time helps tremendously. Another thing is Eric, who has the salary negotiation workshops. Eric has been truly phenomenal in saying, hey, network, network, network. Network, network, network. Why? Because out of the 3 offers I got out of Codesmith, 2 were referrals from Codesmith alumni. And I would go on LinkedIn and I would see a job and it says, hey, 2 former Codesmith people worked here. And I would reach out and do a direct mail. And I remember my sister saying, aren't you embarrassed to like reach out to somebody you don't know? I'm like, I don't care. I need money. I need a job. I need something. And I reached out to them. They said, hey, yeah, let's hop on a call. I'm more than happy to refer you. First interview, second interview, third interview, offer. So definitely, hands down, make sure you network. Start reaching out to friends, family, colleagues now and staying in connection with them because it helps tremendously. So that definitely that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Eric Kerson's advice is worth its weight in gold, or probably even more valuable than that. So that's great to hear. Perfect. So one of the best things about Codesmith, at least in my experience, is during your senior portion, each of you work on your open source product, which is OSP, through OS Labs. How did you feel about your experience working on your OSP and how that prepared you for the job that you have now?
So although I am a senior software engineer at Aledade, I don't start till Monday, but I can definitely tell you that I'm confident in my abilities to do my job well. It will be in technology not necessarily taught at Codesmith because they don't go through Vue, they don't go through Python, and that really doesn't matter because the OSP, the whole experience is nothing but learning how to learn, learning how to work with a team, and not being afraid to get your hands messy. One of the other things I want to share about that is during the interview process, there are so many questions about what are your experiences? Like, why are you actually qualified for this job? About 90% of all of my stories that showed this is why I'm good for this position were from working on the OSP, whether dealing with team members and having empathy or dealing with something like that, learning something new, going through and having to learn something that you've never even touched before, the thought processes going into all of it. Everything that you could possibly need to talk about to get that first job is absolutely through the process of the OSP.
Yeah, that's wonderful that you touched on both the technical and non-technical aspects of that learning experience. So thank you so much for sharing. Nick?
Yeah, so the first thing that I can think of is just being able to look at code and pick it up and kind of learn fast. It's exactly what Etana said. Like, you learn how to learn a lot throughout Codesmith, and the OSP is not an exception to that because for an OSP in general, you can, at least with my cohort and my experience, we were allowed to iterate on an existing product, or we were allowed to make a new product, which is what me and my team had done. And I just had to learn completely new things on how to build out a Chrome extension in a certain way. And, one of the things that really taught me was how to dive deeply into documentation, how to read that thoroughly and well, because documentation is honestly the saving grace for me and a lot of other engineers. And, that's exactly what I've been doing these past 2.5 weeks when I had to pick up a whole new language that I've never even worked with before or heard of before in my current role. But, it was so satisfying the other day when I was able to use that language and the framework that was given to basically do a full stack application because of what Codesmith taught me how to do and how to do it fast. And on the more emotional side of things, I'm really bad at asking for help. I'm like so bad at that in my general life. But when you're so stuck and when you have to solve a problem and you have to get something done, that OSP experience is what taught me how to really ask for help and ask the right questions for help. And that's once again still carrying through my current role where, I'm afraid of asking for help. One, because I'm like, oh, I don't want to seem like I don't deserve this role. And I think they're going to fire me if I ask this question, but it's not true. Empathy carries through across all engineers for the most part, hopefully. And, being able to ask insightful questions and being able to approach problems in the way that Codesmith has taught me has really been teaching me a lot throughout my current role.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear. I think that's a great job tying back into that imposter syndrome that you might be experiencing at some point in the job, but experiencing it through Codesmith throughout the program really can set you up for success as you onboard. So thanks for sharing. Zahara?
Yeah, I think the OSP was really helpful. Obviously, as people have mentioned, like on the job hunt, as real experience working in a team, and the workflow that you actually use is very similar to what you will do in the real world. For me, I was actually very fortunate. My team and I did a lot of market research, like checking to see like what were the keywords in job listings, and we picked a project that was like pretty applicable to modern tech stacks. And actually at my job, like we use a very similar tech stack to the one I used on OSP. So it helped me a lot in the interview process. Not that I, definitely like there were some things we don't use like Go and Python that I had to pick up. But again, like picking up things is not a problem. Read the manual, look at Stack Overflow, ask for help when you need it. Like, don't be afraid. Yeah, contributing. So that's really helped me contribute like really quickly at my job. I'm third weekend, but I'm already like doing PRs and putting out like code reviews, finding mistakes other people are making. So like it's just because you're a Codesmith alum doesn't mean you can't quickly adapt and fit the role. Be humble. It's definitely one thing I would say. Keep a beginner's mindset, and that is something that my job actually encourages as one of their core values. So I was definitely lucky to find like a good fit in that regard.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thanks for sharing an awesome job on like onboarding so quickly. That's actually hugely impressive. Perfect. Rami?
Yeah, for us, we decided to do something new from scratch. You have the opportunity to sort of reiterate on previous open source projects or start from scratch. And we decided to use a new framework, Astro.js, which actually helps me tremendously in my current job. Because in my current job, we are literally starting something called Tourcast, which is golf's version of live, like when a player hits a golf at the tee, you see this live, the live radar, literally where the golf is landing. And I'm seeing tons and tons of data coming in from the radars and lasers and people on the ground. And to be able to create an open source project from scratch allowed me to think, wait, this is what we need to do. And it's funny because the lead architect, he was thinking desktop design. And I said, hey, should we think about mobile first in this case? Because a lot of the users with Tourcast are mobile users. And he said, wow, I didn't even think about that. And I was a little bit like, okay, you know what? Yeah, all right. I'm a little, gassed up and excited that I said that. But you have to always think about these things, that it's there. And the second thing is teamwork. I really appreciate, like Zahara said, like being humble, working as a team and understanding if someone makes a mistake, you can't just say, what the hell is this code? Like, how did you make this mistake? Like we have a few team members who, when you have like a modal showing, it's supposed to be not really displayed because when it's mobile friendly, it shows. It's something very complicated, but it creates this bug that it's been taking me 3 days to spend on. But being humble, not blaming it on someone, saying, you know what, this is my team and I'm going to make sure we all succeed. That was like sort of like one of the main like iterations of like the open source project.
That's great to hear. And yeah, I think that also ties back into that sense of community that Codesmith really looks for in candidates and also deeply instills throughout the entire program. And I think it really does a great job of like, hey, this is us, the team, versus the problem, which, can be the code or technical difficulties, but it's never person against person. So it's great to hear. We can jump into some additional questions. So for each of you, what's your favorite part of your role or anything that you've worked on? Or if you haven't started, any particular thing you're looking forward to in your upcoming role or new technology you're excited about learning?
I am very excited to learn some very new things. So learning Vue and learning Python, it's really exciting. Not that, like, there's so many things to learn always, but I definitely love to learn new things as well. And I'm just excited to get to work on teams and see what the dynamics are as well. Obviously, sorry, there's a cat that is right there. So seeing the dynamics of the team, how it will probably differ from people in Codesmith, where everyone is kind of on the same page and where we're coming from, why we're doing this, and just seeing what's different, because there is no right and there is no wrong, and everything is going to be a learning experience. So it's all super exciting.
Perfect. That's great. And I'd also like to interject too, like really touching on that learning to learn. I think that's such a huge part of Codesmith and getting even subsequent jobs of learning new technology. So that's great that you're excited about it. Cool. So we'll move on to Nick.
Yeah, so I haven't really been able to work on any like big projects yet, but a lot of what I've been working on lately has been picking up this language and this framework called Elixir, and then the framework is Phoenix. and being able to use that to kind of build full stack applications. And what I've been able to do with it so far, which has been really fun, is actually go through a lot of my company's code base and see what kinds of projects we're doing and see like what are the small things I can add to it to start. And what I really enjoy is that this company and the projects blend my chemical engineering background with software engineering to really say, how can we best use software and understanding of like batteries essentially to help other companies reduce their carbon emissions. And so that's what I really enjoy about my work, is that I know at the end of the day where my company and like the work I'm going to be doing is moving towards a greener planet.
Oh, that's great to have that amazing mission statement. Also, Ryan Trotz, who's another Codesmith alum, he actually gave a whole presentation on the Elixir conference on his learnings and best practices. So that's cool if you can look it up on YouTube as well. Awesome. So we'll move on to Zahara.
Yeah, being fairly new, I think the exciting part is like all the tools, all the languages we use were built from the developer experience. Being a startup, like, so what we use is pretty exciting in general. Like, we use Next.js, we use Prisma, we use Tailwind. These will sound like gibberish to y'all, but these things are really nice. Like Prisma as an ORM, like for a SQL database in the background, like that makes my job a lot easier. Using Tailwind, that makes CSS so much easier. You're gonna learn everything the hard way, the Codesmith way. But what I'm excited about is just like the efficiencies and like just like the dev experience, and also just being on the ground floor of like a foundational technology as far as like AI. That in itself was not something I was really looking for. I was really just looking for a good work environment, which I did find. But another thing that I'm very excited about, and I've already made like some contributions to, is just like essentially like training the models to be less, toxic. There's a lot of problems, with AI when you get down to it, and one of the biggest problems is it's a very, no offense, like it's a very cis white male centric technology, and we need more diverse people in it. So I think I'm really honored to be part of that on the ground floor. So.
Oh, that's really cool technology to be a part of. That's great insight. Perfect. So we'll move on to Rami.
Yeah, for me, it was more of like just I never played golf in my life. So when I got this offer, I had to do like a YouTube crash course. And for me, it was just sitting on the plane, moving to Jacksonville because that's the golf capital of the world. And when I'm working on Tourcast, some guy behind me is like, "Hey, you work in golf?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm one of the developers who works on this front end Tourcast." And he was like, "Dude, I love that website." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm one of the creators. Let me show you some of the new features." And my wife was like, he didn't care, obviously, but I was kind of too excited to show it to everybody on the plane for some reason. But it's a very beautiful thing when you're there and you're sort of like learning new technologies. For example, Codesmith teaches you SQL and non-SQL, NoSQL databases, but I use GraphQL when it comes to sort of like the queries being rendered. And there's a reason why we use that. There's a reason why we use Next.js, Tailwind, which I think Zahara mentioned. Like, it's really cool to learn a lot of things. And the most beautiful thing, I'm a very visual person, so transitioning into coding was the toughest, most like I'm going to be real. It was a depressive few months for me because my brain just was not comprehending letters and numbers. But for the first time in my life, I am seeing Russell Crowe's A Beautiful Mind patterns just show up on the walls, and I'm sleeping, dreaming code and objects and arrays and the way, and I actually like it. Like, I'm not going crazy, but I'm actually liking it. I'm loving it. And I think that's something that I'm truly enjoying, and that it will continue to be a lifelong experience.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I actually had the same experience. I'd wake up at like 3 a.m, be like, this is the bug in my OSP, and this is how I solve it. So it's actually really fun when you're just so passionate and have a great community surrounding you. Perfect. So for the people who are considering applying to Codesmith, maybe they're on the fence or in the process of, is there any advice you would give to them?
Absolutely. I don't know if all the other cohorts have the same motto, but in Petrie, we have snuggle with the struggle. So pretty much there's going to be challenges. and things are not always going to come easy. And embrace that. Enjoy the times that are hard. Enjoy having to struggle with things, because that's really where the most growth happens. And this can happen when you're in the application process too. If you're scared of the interview process, that's something that you get to embrace as a person to really get better at and deal with the emotions that come up. And however you choose to deal with it, however that happens out, that is just 100% growth right there. If you're afraid, if you're vulnerable, if you have anyone to turn to, whatever it is that allows you to struggle with that struggle, it is such an amazing thing, and you will be amazed by what you can accomplish when you do that.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. And I actually heard the same thing back all the way in 2020. So that's great that they're still reiterating that, because it's honestly a wonderful and beautiful saying. Perfect. So Nick.
Yeah, I think just throughout the entire process, the number one thing that I wish I had done for myself more so was actually just being kinder to myself about the process. I think whenever anyone thinks about doing Codesmith, it's usually like I want to change my career, essentially saying I want to change my life. And you put that yourself on this timeline sometimes about I need to get this done by XYZ time frame, and sometimes it just doesn't line up. And you're bummed because it doesn't work out for you that way. But I think throughout this whole process, like, I could have been nicer to myself. And when I was nicer to myself, that's when I saw myself flourishing so much more, was because I was allowing myself that grace and that time to just be like, okay, you know what? Like, I'm going to be stuck here for a little bit. I'm going to embrace this struggle. And that is where the deep and hard learning comes from, and the growth as a person, but also as an engineer. And also, when you're kind to yourself, especially within Codesmith, you're going to find that you're going to be especially kind to others as well. And that's where the empathetic engineering shines through. And at least with my cohort, like, we still speak every day. And it's because we were able to be so real and kind with each other in helping each other out that we are able to continually help and support one another.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. I actually had a wonderful engineering manager when I worked, and he said, happy engineers write quality code. So I think that's cool to learn throughout Codesmith and then carry with you throughout your career. Perfect. Zahara?
Yeah, I think that's really both of them said like really good advice. Just to echo, like, I wish I were kinder to myself during Codesmith as well. Probably should got more sleep later on in the curriculum. Probably would have written less buggy code. And I think one of the biggest things that is very important is to stay positive, focus on the progress you're making. Like, look back a month from where you are now and see like, oh, I know how to do X, Y, and Z now. I did not know what those even were. And that should help you like keep a more positive mindset.
That's really great advice. I also love how you articulated seeing how far you've come. And just remembering like, oh wow, a couple months ago, like I really struggled with for loops, and now I'm building full stack apps. Like, that's great to remind yourself throughout the program and then throughout your career as well. So really love that insight. And Rami.
Yeah, for me, it was someone who was sort of like this administrator at a high school, won a scholarship, fellowship, because, working with a lot of the youth in the Bronx and encouraging them, to someone who knew nothing in code. I had no idea how much of a detrimental effect it took on my mental health. Feeling this person who was like, hey, Rami, I need help with this. Hey, Rami, can you help me with this? I was like, yeah, I got you. To something like, I need help. And I cannot emphasize, and I want to keep this real, the amount of times I've cried the past year equals to the 15 years previous combined. And you will have those days. You will have days where you feel defeated, where you call yourself all these terrible names, which I've done. But I think you truly have to find this other side of you that's like, hey, it's okay. You got this. You are better today than yesterday. And, I know I'm being cheesy right now, but there's a picture I took on August 17th, 2021, right here. This was actually in Vienna. And I remember I was so depressed that day. I was just having rough going back to work because the work environment was toxic, and I was just so sad that, for so many days. And I saw a software engineer on his computer at a cafe, and I said, you know what, I've always wanted to be a software engineer. Today is the day I make that initiative. Fast forward 2 years, 2 weeks later, you know, thank goodness, thank God, like I'm here with a computer, a software engineer. And I'm telling you, it's a tough process, but I promise you, it will all be worth it. So just remember, be kind, compassionate, and loving to yourself, because I think every one of us has said that, and we said it so beautifully that I think it's something to always have in the back of your head.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I actually had a similar experience being a software engineer in a cafe when I hated my previous job. So that's kind of funny to hear. But we are about 15 minutes left on time. I do want to make the time for audience-based questions. So I'll pass it back to Kinsley, who can help moderate from there.
Thank you so much, Alex. And just a huge thank you off the bat to all of our panelists and Alex. Big round of applause to you all. We are so grateful and thankful to have your insight and be able to hear from you all and learn from your experiences. I think that's so special to be able to create this community off the bat and be able to continue to connect each and every one of you with alumni and getting to hear a bit about them. And hopefully they'll get to know you all each one day as well. But we have had some great questions sent in. We'll do our best to get through a few of them, and any we don't get to, I will reach out to you over Slack in the next day. So if for some reason I don't get to your question, there's a reason I asked for your name, so I will go through and Slack message each of you your answers if we don't quite get there. But I wanted to start out with one that I saw that I think some of our panelists will be able to speak to. Etana in particular, you came to mind. But someone did ask, when looking for jobs, did you have multiple to choose from? And how did you know which job to take? And if you didn't have multiple options, how did you know when to accept a job instead of taking the risk and waiting for a potentially better offer? So you all are welcome to answer that, or if anyone off the bat has a response, please go ahead and kick off.
Well, I actually got an offer on my very first interview. It was a hybrid job, so it was a 3-day on-site, and already it was more than double what I'd been making as my last position. And I was like, oh, but I really, really want a remote position. I really, really want a remote position. So I complained to my husband, who also went through Codesmith and is an engineer, to other people. I was like, what should I do? Even to my mom. And in the end, I was like, no, I have to say no. I just have to say no, because it's not what I want. That's literally the only important thing. Is I wanted it to be remote, and the money didn't matter, and nothing else mattered at that time. So I said no. And then they came back and they're like, okay, but we really like you. So how about like another $10,000? I was like, okay, I already went through all this pain and this suffering to say no in the first place. So I had to do the whole thing again and talk to various people before I was like, okay, no, I just can't do this. And then they stopped bothering me, which is great. And then 5 months later is when I got the offer that I actually wanted to accept. But through that whole process of time, I changed who I was so much. From the beginning of where I was not so kind to myself, where I was trying to be a different person and like just kind of make things happen, to deciding what are the important things, what am I actually really looking for, what will make me happy, that I can be an amazing employee, an amazing engineer, and have somewhere to grow into. So like for a while I was looking for, the culture was super important. And then after a few interviews, I'm like, okay, everyone feels like that's something that I shouldn't even be asking so much about. Because it'd be like, it just felt weird. I could tell from the whole conversation that I was asking maybe too much culture questions, not enough tech questions. And so I started getting in my head, and then I had to like kind of come back to myself, be like, but what do I want? And the culture is still what I want. And then I started interviewing with this company about a month ago. And the first interview, I was like, oh, I really like this. And then I got the next interview. I was like, oh, I love what the company does. I love the mission that they're doing. I hope this is the one, but if it isn't, I'm open to, just continuing on and growing as a person until I do find the right one. And then I had a technical assessment I was given. I was like, great. It was not timed, I had done other technical assessments where I felt like I was being treated like an automaton. Super short timing, impossible expectations, and just made me feel like a complete idiot. Because like, how could anyone do it unless they were just an AI? So I had an assessment that felt like it was a real person, and that I was being respected as an engineer. And I did great on that. And then I had my final 2 interviews. One of them was literally 30 minutes about talking about values and the mission, making sure that we were on the same page of what we wanted. And this is where all of those stories for my open source product, that's where they all came in. I got to share about how we made engineering decisions, how I worked with other people, how I had empathy, how I had courage. All of that was from working on the OSP. And then the final interview was more about the culture and me talking about all of the code I had done. And I felt so respected as a person, so heard. And I was like, if they don't give me this, I'm definitely going to cry for like 4 days straight and go from there. But they gave me an offer, and it was the one. It was the only one that felt like this is right. So pretty much from start to finish of like 5.5 months of getting an offer in the first one, totally screwing up my mentality, to saying, I know what I want, and I'm going to wait for it, and I'm going to make that happen whenever it happens.
Thank you so much, Etana, for your answer. I think that is a really incredible example of being able to, hold out for what you want if you have that ability to. And just exactly like the question asked, knowing when to step back, knowing when to choose what's right for you. It really just comes down to your own personal opinions and the things that you're looking for, but also recognizing that you have community who will guide you to, like Etana said, being able to talk with your cohort mates, talk to members of the Codesmith team, run the ideas by everyone, get everyone's opinion that you feel like you need is really, really valuable. So thank you for your insight, Etana. We have lots of questions, so I'll try to get through a few. And again, I will message those who we don't get to or who I think I can answer more directly. But I know that, let's see, we did have a question actually related to OSP, as we mentioned that some people choose to do new open source products while others choose to ideate on some previous open source products. Now that you all have gone through your own open source product building, they wanted to know if anyone who did a new one versus ideating felt like there was a difference between the two, or how you were able to explain that in your job process.
Yeah, I can take this one. So I had, me and my team had ideated a new product, Star Trident on GitHub, and we were actually there were 8 groups within my cohort, and we were the only one to actually do a Scratch project. Everyone else had iterated on something that was currently existing. And honestly, I had a wonderful time creating something new with my team and being able to say, hey, I built this. I was able to say, I built out the splash page. I built out the business logic behind this. And I could take that full ownership of this product with my cohort mates. And I think what I really enjoyed about building out something here was that I could really dive into, like, what are the issues that engineers are facing right now? Like, what's going on that could help other engineers? And so this product is actually meant to help build out what's called end-to-end testing for engineers to really speak to, like, how is a website performing? How is it going from when a user goes in and out? And being able to build that narrative in my job hunt, I spoke more so on how this product helps the user experience and the client journey. And when I had one of my interviews with JP Morgan, I talked about my OSP and like, hey, this is how we help the user journey. That one phone screening with JP Morgan turned into 2 different job screenings as well, because they're like, actually, because of what you're saying, we want to interview you now for this other role. And that's a role that I actually ended up getting as well. And so whether it's a choice between building a Scratch or ideating on something that's existing, it's really a matter of personal preference, because there obviously so many success stories. Regardless, it's really a matter of what you and the team really want to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. That was very helpful to hear. Let's see here, a few of our other questions. I'm gonna reshape this one a little bit to be a bit more applicable. And Alex, I know you're not necessarily a panelist, but I think you might have some advice as,
Sure.
like we said, Alex is a member of our career support engineer team. But someone asked about how long you wait between your first job and maybe looking to get that second job or looking towards even a promotion. They have a friend in the world who, in the software development world, who said, aim for 6 months, something like that. But just knowing, your experience with Codesmith and the support you have and the support you offer to people, how has your second or post first job journey been like?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Looking further ahead. So when it comes to promotions, a little word of advice is when you do get your job, I highly suggest keeping a logbook of features you've developed or successes you've had. It could be as simple as handwritten. I personally use Notion, but you can use whatever tool you want, just to make sure that you are prepared when that performance review comes. I got promoted, I think 4 months after my first role, and then a second time, like 8 or 9 months in. And then I realized that I wanted to just further my career differently. And honestly, going back to company culture, wanted something a little bit more collaborative, with a different set of teammates. So then I went on my second job search. That one was actually rather quick. It was a lot easier than the Codesmith, post Codesmith search. Both were really great, and I think everyone touched on that career growth and growing as a person throughout that job search. But the second job search, I think I waited a year and a half, and then switched to platform engineering, which is a deep interest of mine. Learning more about AWS and specifically video streaming was something that was of particular interest. So that's where I transitioned my career.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. I'll try to squeeze in 1 or 2 more questions. Let's see what we can do here. But I know we have a question about, for some of actually people in the room, you might have just applied, you might actually just be looking to apply. You all are at different spots in your journeys. But some people are wondering, if you had to choose between the remote and in-person options, which would you choose? I know for some of you, in-person wasn't even an option at the time that you took the immersive. But if you all want to highlight, or if any of you have any highlights you want to give from either time in person or time spent remote and what stood out to you, I think that would be lovely to hear. Any takers?
I can just add a little bit, like obviously I'm in Colorado, there is no in-person. I would have loved to do an in-person, but I didn't really consider it. So I don't know what I would have done ultimately. But what I can say is there's such a diversity of people in the remote option. So you have people with families who are still taking care of their families, people who are working full time, people who are maybe in another country, and their classes at like 3 to 6 a.m. for them. And of course, just Eastern through Pacific time. So what it ends up doing that was really cool is there's just a lot of different perspectives. There's a lot of different levels of experience that I don't know if it would be the same if everyone is kind of from the same area and obviously is able to do a full-time immersive. So that's my 2 cents.
I'd actually like to jump in here. I know I'm not a panelist, but I think I have a unique perspective because I was the first remote cohort, partially remote. So I actually went in person March of 2020, like March 1st or 2nd or something, and then spent like 3 weeks in Venice Beach, and then actually went remote because the world changed because COVID happened. I think both have really great cultures, and I actually didn't notice a change in culture going from in person to remote. So I don't think you can have a really wrong option.
Thank you, Alex. I knew you'd be able to speak to that. And thank you, Etana, as well. All right, we have technically 1 minute, so we will fast track and speed through hopefully one more question here. Let's see. I know, actually here, this is an interesting one. So people are wondering a bit more about full stack or back-end jobs. So they were saying, based off of JavaScript itself, they felt like that lends itself a bit more to being in the front end world. But did you feel like you could leave Codesmith and apply for any full stack backend or front end role? What was kind of your confidence level with what you were applying to? I'm seeing a lot of head nods. Any comments from the crowd?
I will say that Codesmith taught me well with what we did, in so much so with front end and back end. I in general actually just prefer front end work, but my role is a full stack position. But because of what I learned from Node.js and the general design patterns of what we did, I was able to understand my company's code base that much faster because I was like, oh, it's the exact same thing in a different language. And that's what told me, and basically like, how can I explore this and see exactly what I need to look for? So in terms of my comfort with backend, it was the same thing, just a different language. And so in terms of comfortability, I just lean towards front end. So I applied to front end roles, but I'm not scared about the backend at all.
Okay, awesome. Anything else to add from any of our panelists?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just really fast. You can do anything. It's whatever you want to do. It really just depends on you, because you are definitely prepared to do anything, because again, you are taught to learn how to learn. So whatever actually piques your interest, that's what you can do.
I wholeheartedly agree. I've spent my entire career post Codesmith on the back end, which was my personal interest.
Amazing. Well, I will wrap up with one final question, which I will actually answer, which was a question about Codesmith career support. Does it only last for a year, or how long does it go post-grad, and what happens then? Codesmith career support is for life. So any of these lovely panelists here, any of our graduates can come back whenever they want. We have open Slack spaces for people to post in every single day. We have lovely members of our team like Alex, who you can meet with one-on-one to review things like your resume, to meet to have a mock technical interview, to meet to have any sort of practice or review your narrative in any way possible. And that holds from your first job to your fifth job and beyond, whether you're trying to discuss a promotion, whether you're looking to hop into your second, third, fourth, fifth, wherever you're going job. We are here to support you through that transition, make sure you have the community that you took the time to build, and making sure that you have the resources and support you need as you transition through any new period of life, whether that is moving up, moving on to something new, or if you need some additional help, if you have a layoff, if your company shuts down, whatever the case is, we're going to be there to support you however you need, as long as you're willing to reach back out to us and let us know and keep connecting with us. But thank you all so much for attending today's panel. We are so grateful that you all were able to come and meet some of our wonderful alumni. And again, a huge round of applause to each of our alumni. Etana, Nick, Zahara, Rami, Alex, thank you for all of your insight and all that you continue to bring to our community. I'm sure many people will have many questions and look forward to connecting with you. But again, thank you all so much. Huge thanks to our panelists. And I hope you all have an amazing rest of your evening. Hoping to see you all again soon.